Yeah, good morning. My name is Mukovhe. When I got the invitation from the NYDA to hear about, or to talk about BRICS, I thought diplomatic spaces are really for diplomatic people. I struggle to be diplomatic about any matter that I participate in, so if I say any undiplomatic thing, just remember I don't actually belong here. Now, but to acknowledge all the excellencies and especially our Deputy Minister, I wish to take the next 5 minutes to tinker with what I believe are cautionary points with regard to trade and the future economic trajectory of our continent and BRICS in general. But as an economic geographer who is interested in geopolitical positioning, I struggle to imagine the South African economy outside of the African continent as a whole. I do this in order to disrupt what I call the epistemological and ontological foundations of coloniality. In other words, the South African economy is a colonial output of the division of the continent, so I refuse to do that and to talk about Africa in relation to BRICS and the rest of the world. That's the point, the first point that I wish to stress, which I think is important, but also the power to defend our territorial integrity and national sovereignty, but in particular our ability to write our own terms and conditions of development is inextricably linked to us looking in the mirror and liking what we see. The ability of this continent to be a meaningful participant in geopolitical developments is inherently linked to us fighting 3,000 years of siege. For 3,000 years and more, we've been under siege as a continent. We've been under siege because we had and still have that which the rest of the world needs, that which they can't do without, and most importantly, that which they are not prepared to pay a proper price for. So in entertaining trade analysis and economic analysis, we have to take the position that we are that which everyone else needs, and therefore our position of strength emerges from that. Why am I saying this? I don't have enough time to justify that statement, but safe to say that 2023 marks the 75th anniversary of the post-World War II economic order that hasn't been particularly kind to the future economic prospects of this continent and, of course, this country. This country, I need not explain, is the most unequal one in the world, which means the neoliberal experiment has failed, which means as we talk about trade and economic analysis, our attempt to undo decades of plundering and exploitation that predate apartheid, which was slightly a more sophisticated version of coloniality, we must be prepared to write our own script. All right. Now, having said that, I want to stress that terms and words matter. So when we talk about free trade or free markets, Ha-Joon Chang, the South Korean economist, cautions us to say, in the past, the dominant group's expressed belief in free markets or free trade should not be conflated with actual adherence to free trade. In fact, the version of free trade doctrine as enforced by the currently dominant order has been a case of do as I say and not as I do. All right. Second last point that I wish to stress before I conclude, given the limitation of time for such an important topic, is that I want to recommend the book Kicking Away the Ladder. Because Kicking Away the Ladder gives you a script of how those who reached economic might by protecting infant industries today preach against that particular method, hence kicking away the ladder. It means you climb the top of the roof and then you kick the ladder with which you climb so that everyone else can walk up the mountain. All right. But also, if we're talking about free trade, we must ask the questions, are we free? What is the content and form of that freedom? Until we have full control over the wealth-producing resources of our land, we cannot possibly be free, which begs the question then, what is the role of unfree people in free trade? My answer is very straightforward. There is no free trade by unfree people. So, the point number one in meaningfully engaging in free trade is wrestling the control over the wealth-producing resources of our land and then writing the terms and conditions with which anyone else wants to interact with us. That is my proposition, at least. Now, we ought to put our foot down because President Nkrumah warned about something called sham independence or client states. And President Nkrumah said in his handbook for revolutionary warfare said, client states or sham independent states are states that are independent de jure and dependent de facto, independent on paper, dependent in reality. Now, that statement remains relevant today. If you are to judge us by how far we have come, he added, you ought to understand the depth from which we emerged. And in the context of South Africa, and as I said in the beginning, Africa, my head struggles to imagine this thing or this construction called South Africa. So within the context of the African continent, President Nkrumah was cautioning us to say no zinc, no gold, no manganese must live without being beneficiated and industrialized here. We must trade in finished goods because our ability to trade in finished goods is linked to security independence, economic independence, and the ability to preserve our way of life. So, in conclusion, I'm a teacher there by the University of Johannesburg. I earn a salary from Deputy Minister Manamela. So if anything I say here gets me fired, I will be by the corner of the CSIR there saying, PhD from the UK, job, please. Now, that sounds like a joke, but actually, I want to say something related to that. I've been following Uganda and much of the East African regions and how they are revolutionizing economic freedom. You see, I want to put a proposition here and leave. Our preoccupation with the state of unemployment in the country is informed by something. People get employed in order to serve their livelihoods and experience what is called basic security. But could we subvert the impact of unemployment without necessarily giving someone employment? I want to argue we can. We can subvert the might, the undue and problematic might of unemployment by preaching a new curriculum that suggests that goat farming might very well be better than astronomy. That is to say, if we send our deputy minister to go secure offtakes and the leadership that just spoke now, perhaps for the next 10 years we must be turning South Africa into a goat breeding capital of the world. That way, when livelihoods are restored and wealth is created, the absence of jobs stings less. It's only because of time that we pause here, but thank you for the opportunity.
A firebrand in his own right, an academic, Dr. Mukovhe, Dr. Morris, really gave us an inspiring statement. It gives us, I think, a philosophical understanding of South Africa's positioning within the global arena and within the BRICS. I think Africa this year is actually blessed because in East Africa, in Uganda, Uganda is also chairing the non-aligned movement. We are people of the Bandung Conference, people of the developing South. So it's an honor that this panel discussion starts with a philosophical understanding of what BRICS is.